Thanks, everybody. Everybody, please be seated. I'd like to welcome everybody to the first meeting of the new Rotary year. Hope everybody had a great long weekend celebrating the greatest nation in the world. And I think we have quite a few guests today. We've got some business to attend to on the front end, and we have a great speaker today. So I want to go ahead and get us going. We're going to start with Bart King giving the invocation, and then our pledge and four-way test will be led by Linus Sugis.
Let us pray. Almighty God, you're a mighty God. You're powerful. You listen to us. You hear our complaints. You hear our praise. We ask you, Lord, to be with members of this Rotary Club. Be with this community. Be with friends. Be with those who are ill. Comfort them. Lift them up. We'd ask you, Lord, to come into this room this morning and be close with us and be near to us and dear to us. Go with us this day and in days to come. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it true? Second, is it faithful? Third, and fourth, and our own fifth, we certainly hope so.
Now I'd like to ask Sherry Koss to introduce guests and visitors.
Do I have to use a microphone? Oh, okay. Welcome, everybody. If you have a guest or you are a guest, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, then I'll come over to you, and it'd be fantastic.
Good morning. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Greetings and salutations. My name is Constance Smith Burwell, and I'm a guest of Miss Arlene Martin.
Good morning. My name is Arlene Martin Norman, and this is my second visit. I'm interested in becoming a member. Thank you for always making me feel welcome. And I have a company called Healthcare Future Consulting Services and Sales. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Anybody else?
This is John Cheney. He's a fellow Rotarian from Mount Juliet. He's also a coworker of mine. He is an architect by training, but he's doing some meeting people and getting to be friendly with folks for our company. So just wanted to welcome John.
Hi, this is David DeMarco. He's a partner at my firm, CRI, and he also happens to be married to Sana's cousin. So.
I will do that.
Hello, I'm Rob Eichert, and I am a guest of my friend and neighbor Jennifer Ruane, and I'm president of the Tennessee Grocers and Convenience Store Association.
Anyone else? Did I miss anybody? Okay, thanks.
Now we're going to do our Rotary moment. No worries. Everybody take a couple bites. So on the screen, you will see a quote from a past president of Rotary International. The theme for this year, chosen by the current president of International, first female ever, by the way, is Imagine Rotary. So all the amazing things, good things that Rotary does in the world are things that someone imagined could be accomplished by a group of people joining forces to help others. Things like eradicating polio, providing clean water and electricity to villages that would not otherwise have those things that we all take for granted. And even things like building the first ever inclusive playground in Brentwood, Tennessee. So the Rotary Foundation, in addition to our club's own foundation, really are what make the things that Rotarians imagine possible. That's our Rotary moment. And Devin will lead us in Happy Bucks.
Who's happy today? Oh, there's got to be more than just 2 or 3. I'm over here on this side. Who's got a little money they want to give in? Lewis looks happy. Lewis, what are you happy about?
After surgery and a lot of therapy, I've recovered and back to pretty much normal. I got the walking stick Monday, so I feel like I'm well on my way.
Congratulations, Lewis. That's great. All right. Anybody else over here? Don't make me walk back. Uh-oh. All right.
I'm being inducted today.
That makes us happy too. Wow. Working ahead on dues payment. That's really good. All right. Who's happy on this side of the room? There we go. Yo, yes, sir.
I'm just very happy that in a very short time, my granddaughter will be off to the University of Colorado Boulder in a pre-med program, and I'm just thrilled to death for her.
She know what she's getting into going pre-med? You hope so. There you go. All right. Good luck to her. Mr. Heinman.
I'm just so glad to see so many visitors here today and potential members. That's a great way to kick off the new year. So glad to have the lovely ladies with us at our table. But to the Restaurant Association, can you get pancake batter? It may make a difference. Just keep that in mind.
Very true. Very true. All right. Yeah, I'm missing somebody. Alan, I was over there like a minute and a half ago. All right. I'll be back. Yes, ma'am. What are you happy about today?
Well, I'm happy that I got up and I'm healthy today and life is just wonderful. And of course, I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're happy you're here. Thank you, ma'am. All right. What else? All right, doctor. Is it a joke?
I knew that Jane wanted Rotary to go green, but I didn't realize that. But I did bring my green iPad. Let me show you. Bucks is this special license plate. Our thoughtful son Doug did this 6 years ago on our 50th anniversary. Married 7266 in Columbus, Ohio. In front of my car.
That's cool.
You need to pray for my wife, which you understand. She's put up with me almost 60 years, 56 years of marriage, 3.5 dating before that. So here goes $60.
Hey. Are we praying for her sanity? Is that anything she can get? All right. Anybody else? Mr. Kaplan, are you happy? Not really. Kind of mediocre. All right. That's never stopped Keeley. All right. Anybody else other than Alan? All right. We'll get over here. Mr. Treadway.
Hey, I tell you what, I've been at Marcus and Millichap for 10 years, almost to the date. And today is my last day. I'm not taking retirement, but I am starting a new business venture, and I'm not allowed to promote it here at Rotary. So in conversation, ask me what I'm doing.
There we go. All right, everybody ask Alan about his new venture, please. All right, nothing else? Madam President, back to you.
Thank you so much. So now we have a couple of announcements. I'll do the first one. As everybody knows, our club is participating with other Rotary clubs in the food distribution in Waverly, Tennessee. This is a need that that came to our attention after the damaging floods in Waverly. But 2 days ago, our assistant district governor issued a challenge to the Williamson County Rotary clubs. He will be issuing a proclamation of achievement on a quarterly basis for the club who has the most percentage of membership participate in these events. And unfortunately, the challenge was just issued, and our next day that we need to staff this project is tomorrow morning. We only have 3 Rotarians signed up so far. So if there's any way you could go to Waverly tomorrow morning, we would so appreciate it, so that think the Franklin Evening Club is really trying to win the award. Let me just say from personal experience that when your alarm clock goes off at 0:30 on a Saturday morning, you'll be irritated at yourself for signing up. But when you get to Waverly and you witness the need, you'll be irritated at yourself for being irritated. And honestly, it's just the day I was there, Hunter, I think there were 100 cars lined up an hour and a half before the food started being distributed. I mean, just breaks your heart. And I've volunteered at plenty of other events before where you sometimes question whether the need was actually there, whether people were trying to game the system or something. The need is there, and it's very obvious. And you will leave there being reminded of why you are a Rotarian. So the goal for our next distribution is in October, and I want this club to need a Greyhound bus to get there. But tomorrow, anybody who can go, please consider it. Larry, you're up on golf tournament.
I was going to sing. Okay, so a little update on the golf tournament. We're all ready to go with one exception, fundraising. Oh, that's the main reason we have the golf tournament, right? Fundraising. Well, we're a little behind there. We've got 7 weeks left. Back on March the 4th, when we started this, we had 6 months, and it sounded like an eternity. And everybody kept saying, well, we'll get it in. I'll get mine in later. Don't worry about it. Well, we're 7 weeks out, guys, and we're a little bit short, as you're going to see in a few minutes. We had a goal to have 100% participation from our membership. We've never gotten that. We had 90% in 2018. We had 80% last year. Right now, we're at 62% of our members have contributed or sold a sponsorship. So we got a little work to do there. Let's take a look at some information and maybe some comments from some of our members about where we are right now. First of all, Tom Carr, president of the BRCCF, you can see what he says. Money raised by the golf event helps us serve effectively. Y'all remember we gave out $30,000 a month ago to 15 different charities, and we're going to give out $32,000 in scholarships this spring. So we got to have money for that, plus all the other stuff we do. 52 days till the event, 7 weeks, a little more than that. We have 128 players, a full field. That's never a problem. That's all we're going to have. I could have a lot more players if I wanted it. We've turned away a lot of teams, but we're 128 players strong, so we're there. We've got 114 sponsorships sold so far. We had 189 last year. You can do the math and figure out how far off we are right now. We had 31 new sponsorships this year, which is excellent. That helps make up some of that gap, but we've still got more to do. Now, Miss Sybil made a little comment. Her rich neighbor wrote a check. All she did was ask him. And he did it 2 years in a row. Oh, and he moved. Oh, you chased, well, okay. But she did it. She did what we've asked y'all to do. She just talked to somebody she knew that had some money and got sponsorship 2 years in a row. Our goal, net goal for this year for the tournament's $100,000. We had 94 last year. We have to raise 140 in order to make that 100. So that's where we are. Right now, we've raised, as of today, I got a check over here for $350, so it's a little bit less. $101,000 so far we've raised. So obviously, we're $39,000 short with 7 weeks to go. So where do we find $39,000? Right now, there are 69 hole sponsors outstanding from last year at $350. There's 24,000 of it right there. If we'll just go back and get our sponsors from last year. As I said earlier, and that's me, 100% membership participation will definitely get it done. 62% will not. We get 2 major sponsorships left. That's all we have. They're $1,000 each, so we'll get $2,000 when we sell those, and I'm sure we will. We need 39 new whole sponsorships. That's $13,850. 39 sponsorships from 106 members. Surely we can make that happen. The total, if we get those 3, is $40,000. Covers our 39. And Mr. Treadway wants everybody to remember that he not only sold a sponsorship, he has sold 2 sponsorships. And you're going to get more, right? There you go. We had a little comment here. We're going to give you just a second. So we're getting close. Yeah, we need a host sponsor from that company, whatever it is. So please finish strong. We got to continue to do good. Here's a little comment from the A team. Mr. Andrews says, work your pants off. And of course, Jared said, just ask. That's all it takes. So 7 weeks, $39,000. 69 sponsorships outstanding from last year. Please call those and get them in. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. As everybody knows, Larry puts so much time and effort into this club and into this tournament, and we're able to do just amazing things with that money that we raise. So let's work toward 100% participation for Larry. Now, as somebody commented earlier, we love new members, hint, hint, to all of our guests today. And I'm going to ask Tom Carr to come up and induct a new member this morning.
Madam President, Excellency, thank you very much for that. Well, or Your Grace, whatever you prefer. This is James Davis. I'm presenting him to the club. He was sponsored by Jack Massari. Jack's out of town, so I'm going to do the honors. A couple of fun facts about Mr. Davis. His grandfather was Rotarian. He met his wife on a cruise ship where he was a dancer, a professional dancer on the cruise ship. And his wife is from Serbia. So I think that's very interesting. He is a real estate investments guy now and was the former owner of Tree of Life Beauty. I should have gone there, but it wouldn't help me much. So I present to you, you to the club and the club to you, and the payment we talked about earlier to the president is after the club. Don't do that now and then do that later. So, and that's it.
I just wanted to, my grandfather was a longtime Rotarian in Blakely, Georgia. And he was a leader in the group, and he had a lot of roles. And it's an honor to be joining you all. So thank you. I want to continue that tradition. He was a very honorable man, and I highly respected him. And it was recommended that I join one. And so thank you for inducting me.
We're very happy to have you, James. Welcome to the club. And now I'll ask Mayor Little to come and introduce our speaker for today.
Before I do, I had several questions about my little getup here before things. So I'm just going to clear everything up, answer all your questions. I've got a lower body injury and I'm listed day to day. So Our guest today, I'm very honored that he's coming to speak, Jack Johnson. Jack's originally from Texas, moved to Tennessee, I guess about 30 years ago. Married to his wife, Deanna, who's also a great servant leader in our region. She's the 21st Judicial District Judge. They're raising their kids in Franklin. They met at a young Republican function years ago and dedicated to conservative values and faith and freedom. Jack's been in the Senate since 2006. He cast his first vote in the Senate for the first Republican lieutenant governor in 140 years in the state of Tennessee. He's done many other things that were very valuable to our state. Been chairman of the Commerce and Labor Committee. 2018, and I was very, very, very happy about this. He was elected our Senate Majority Leader, where he's done a great job. He's been in banking. He now works at Studio Bank in Cool Springs. He's proudly represented the 23rd District, soon to become the 27th, which includes most of Williamson County. He likes to play the guitar, loves time with his family, and piloting a private aircraft. That's his biography. But let me tell you, as someone who works with our legislature on a regular basis, and I have as a businessman, but also as a commissioner and mayor, Jack is a great servant leader. He's always accessible, always available. And that became really important in March of 2020 as we went through something that term's way overused, but I can tell you from 2 yokes I wore as a businessman and a mayor of the finest city in the world, it was a heavy yoke. And I was very thankful to have great leaders like Jack, who I could call upon as we went through things that were unknown. He's always forthright. His integrity is second to none. And I'm thankful not only to have him as our Senate Majority Leader, I'm also thankful to have him as a friend. And so without further ado, I welcome Senator Jack Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Very, very grateful for those kind words and the introduction and the invitation to be with y'all today. There's a lot going on in our state and our community. Let me say a quick word about my friend Ray Little. You know, one of the things that I think makes Williamson County and the cities in Williamson County as successful as they are, and you don't have to take my word for how successful they are, just look around at the quality of life we have and the communities we have. The businesses that want to move here, the people who want to move here, is a direct result of what Mayor Little said, and that is our great collaborative working relationship. And we talk frequently, especially during our legislative session. There's lots of bills that are coming through. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hydrant sometimes. And so it's important to be able to pick up the phone and call Ray or Kirk Bednar or Ken Moore or any of the city officials and say, hey, we got this bill coming up. Tell me exactly how this is going to affect you. In fact, sometimes I don't even have to call them. They've seen the bill before I did, and they've called me saying, hey, this is a bill that we have real concerns about. So, you know, Brentwood is one of the best managed cities in the entire nation. I can tell you that for a fact. In fact, I'll tell you a quick funny story. Ray's heard this before. This was back maybe 10, 12 years ago. The comptroller of the state of Tennessee, former comptroller, Justin Wilson, who is a great friend and did an amazing job. He's now our comptroller emeritus, if you will. They were doing some things and putting some new procedures in place that were going to create an extra burden on cities, on local governments in terms of their reporting and their budgets. And, you know, the state has to sign off on every city and every county budget, and the comptroller's office does. And our dear friend, many of you will remember the late Charles Sargent, who is a state representative from this area for many years. And he called me up and he said, do you hear what the comptroller is going to do? And I said, yeah, I did. He said, well, I'm not real crazy about that. And so we got on a call and he called up the comptroller and he said, now, Mr. Comptroller, I appreciate what you're trying to do. And there may be some cities who need that extra reporting requirement, but did you know the city of Brentwood has a higher credit rating than the state of Tennessee? The comptroller amended his policies, and for those states that had a AAA credit rating, the state of Tennessee now has a AAA credit rating, but it didn't at that time. So Ray, grateful for your friendship and the ability to get to work with you. It is an honor to get to serve Williamson County in the Tennessee General Assembly as your state senator. For the last 10 years, the district has been Williamson County, and it's the only one in the state that is that way. When the lines were drawn 10 years ago after the last census, Williamson County, the population was just the right size to be a district. Prior to that, the district included about 80,000 people in Davidson County. Of course, with all the growth in Williamson during that 10-year period, it grew into being able to be a state Senate district. And it was the only one in the state that's one county, one senator. Now, after this most recent census, we've continued to grow disproportionately to the rest of the state. And so we redrew the lines, and I had to give up 33,000 people. That was a very tough call because I love all my communities and I love all of my constituents. But what we ended up doing, which made the most sense, is the city of Spring Hill ended up being just about the right number of people. So now Spring Hill goes into the district to the south of us, which is represented by my friend Joey Hensley. So for the coming 10 years, the 27, we had to change the number. That's a long story why we had to do that. But the district will be all of Williamson County with the exception of Spring Hill. When I'm talking to a group about what we do in the legislature and what we've been doing, I always like to start with the budget, because it is the most important thing we decide is how to spend your tax dollars. How many of your tax dollars do we need? Are we getting too many? Do we need to give some back to you? How are we going to spend those dollars? And I'm very proud. As Ray said, I have had the honor of serving not only as your senator, but I was also elected by my Republican colleagues to be the Republican leader of the Senate, where Republicans are the majority party. That makes me the majority leader of the Senate. And in that capacity, I work very closely with Governor Lee. And in fact, I sponsor in the Senate all legislation that the governor would like to get passed. Now, I have my own legislative package, things that are brought to me by people like you or our cities, and I've got all those bills, but then I also sponsor all the governor's bills, which includes the budget. So working very closely with Governor Lee in that capacity and all the folks in the administration. Just on July 1st, just a few days ago, we entered the 22-23 fiscal year for the state of Tennessee. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but it's important you know how we do the budget in the state of Tennessee. We do our budget on a forecasted revenues. So we have a funding board that's made up of economists and constitutional officers and the governor's staff, and they meet and they look at what's going on in the nation's economy and the state of Tennessee, and they come up with a forecasted increase or decrease in terms of revenue that we'll collect. We get about 2/3 of our revenue from sales taxes, and the rest comes from fees and business taxes and some different things like that. But the bulk of our revenue comes from sales taxes. So they will give us a range. They will say, we expect the economy and the revenue in Tennessee to grow by between 2.2 and 3.1% or something. And so we always err on the side of caution. We approach that very conservatively, and we typically choose a figure on the lower end of that range so that we end up with a surplus. We are constitutionally required to balance our budget every year. We have to match our expenses with our revenues. If we get halfway through the fiscal year and our revenues are not meeting that forecasted growth, we have to make adjustments to our budget, because at the end of the year, it's got to true up. That's a constitutional requirement. So obviously, we're very conservative with those projections. In this past fiscal year, we really outperformed our forecast. We came in with a $3 billion surplus, $3 billion over what we had forecasted. And that was on roughly a $50 billion state budget. Now, that's a good problem to have, but it is a problem. It is a problem figuring out what we do and how we handle that. And so what we did with the budget that just went into effect that we passed in this last legislative session is a $52.8 billion budget. Of that $3 billion, we recognized a recurring increase to our base of about $1.7 billion. And I'm going to talk about what we did with the bulk of that with regards to K-12 education in just a moment. But about 1.3 of that, we didn't even recognize. We recognized it as one-time money to come in to use on one-time purposes. Let me stop for a moment and say, like any business or your family budget, you've got recurring revenue and recurring expenses. You got one-time revenue, one-time expenses. So we didn't even recognize 1.3 billion of that. We set it aside and said, we'll use that for one-time purposes, but we're just going to let that carry over into the next year. Why? Because we don't know what's going to happen in this economy. We are probably in a recession right now. We'll see. But when you get 2/3 of your revenue from sales tax, you do really well in the good times, but you get hit really hard in the bad times. And so it was a very fiscally responsible thing to do, to take that 1.3 billion. And again, we took it. What do we do with it? We put 250 million of that into our rainy day fund. That's our state savings account. It's at the highest level it's ever been in, $1.85 billion. That's our state savings account. For the last 4 years, and it just happens to, it's not, I don't take credit for it. It happens to overlap with the time I've been majority leader. We've not borrowed a single penny in the state of Tennessee. And as a result, we are the least indebted state in the nation. I don't know if you knew that, but you take that. Thanks, Skip. If you take all the debt we have in the state of Tennessee, divide it by the number of people in Tennessee, we're the least indebted state per capita in the nation. We're the second lowest tax state in the nation. And yet we're having these record surpluses. And I think it just demonstrates that when you run a tight ship and you maintain a business-friendly economy, the economy will take care of itself if you get out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector does. So in addition to putting that into our rainy day fund, we're paying cash for long-term or large capital projects. Things like we need to put a new roof on an office building, or we need to build a new building at one of our higher education institutions, you know, a science building that's $60 million. Well, in the old days, we would bond that. We would issue bonds and amortize it over 20 years and pay it off over time. We're just writing a check. We're just paying cash for it. And is that my cue that I need to? I'm gonna digress for just a moment. My dad is on his way. I know we had presidential music. I didn't know senators get music as well. My father is on his way from Texas, my little hometown in Texas. By the way, my father's a longtime Rotarian, and he's driving in. I have an event coming up this Sunday, and he's coming in for the event. And I told him, I said, well, I'm not sure when you're going to get there, but you can come to Rotary. And he said, yeah, I could do that. I could get a makeup. But he's not going to make it here in time. I'm going to see him later this afternoon. But he invited me one time when I was home visiting him to come to Rotary and be the speaker at his Rotary Club in my little small hometown in Texas. And there's a friend of our family's who's been there for years. His name is Alvin Nord. And when I walked in, I said hi to Alvin, and he said, hey, Jack, it's great to have a speaker. He said, now listen, I'm the guy who tells you when to quit. I said, okay. He said, we don't like our speakers going on for too long. He said, so I'll be in the back of the room, and when it's time for you to wrap up, I'm going to go like that. So I don't know if that's y'all's version of, this, that you need to wrap it up and come to a conclusion. So anyway, Tennessee is in the best fiscal condition we've ever been in, and that's great. That's wonderful. But again, we really approach that budgeting process with caution. Okay. Now, what did we do with that recurring amount of money? Well, we made the largest increase, even adjusted for inflation, in K-12 education than we've ever made in the history of the state. And I'll tell you why we did that. I can brag about Tennessee. We can talk about a lot of great things going on in Tennessee, but we have our work cut out for us with K-12 education. Now, here in Williamson County, we have Williamson County Schools. We have the Franklin Special School District, phenomenal, among the best schools in the entire nation. But when you look at us as a state in terms of educational outcomes, it's not such a rosy picture. We're making gains. We've made improvements in recent years, but we've got a long way to go. So the way we fund K-12 education, and by the way, it makes up at about 25% of our state budget is what we spend on K-12 education. And that doesn't count what the local governments put in, the county commission and so forth. We use a formula that's commonly been referred to as the BEP formula. That stands for Basic Education Plan. And it's a very convoluted, complicated formula. I've been in the Senate for 16 years. I still don't have a firm grasp of exactly how the BEP formula works. We've been talking about it for a number of years. We need to simplify that, revise it. make it easier to understand. Well, Governor Lee decided this last legislative session, the time is now. And he said, here's what I propose. We're going to redo that formula. We're going to make it better. We're going to make it student-centered. We're going to have more accountability in that funding that we provide for K-12 education. But if we do that, then I think we need to put some additional money in. You should also know we are in litigation. Every school district in the state has signed on to a lawsuit suing us, the state of Tennessee, for not putting enough money into education. That case is sitting on the desk of the Supreme Court, and we felt reasonably certain we were going to lose, and the courts were going to make us put some more money in. I have no problem doing that as long as we know where the money's going. So we have completely rewritten the K-12 education funding formula we have in the state. So I'll use Williamson County as an example because it's right here in our backyard. We are going to allocate $6,850 to every single kid who's in a public school in the state of Tennessee. That is the base funding amount. That'll pay for the teacher, that'll pay for books, it'll pay for buses, it'll pay for the classroom. All the things that you need to educate a child will be in that base amount of money. And then we will make modifications or make additional payments to the district based on specific circumstances, unique learning needs. If you have a special needs child that needs additional help, then they get extra money for that. If you're a Title I school, you're going to get some additional money for that. But the key part of it is that the money goes to the kid. The money funds the child. It doesn't fund bureaucracy or systems or any of that type of thing. And it's really a fairly radical change from the way we've been doing things for the last 30 or 40 years in Tennessee. So I was very proud of that legislation. It will mean more money for our school systems all across the state. But just throwing money after a problem is not the answer. And I want to be very clear about that. That's why it was a dual track path. We'll put the additional money in, but we're going to have a better formula that has more accountability. And we're going to make sure we're funding kids, not processes. The Shelby County school system is a good example. It's a massive school system. I don't remember how many kids they have. It's a bunch, but we know that we're sending them a lot of money and it's not ending up in the classroom. It's not ending up in a teacher salary or a teacher's assistant salary or in tutors and books. I don't mean to pick on them, but it is a fact. The money's going somewhere. It's not going to educate that child. And this new formula will fix that and create that accountability. I do want to leave time for questions. Let me talk about one other really big thing that happened in the state of Tennessee last year. It was in October. Governor Lee called Senate and House leadership to the executive residence, which is very unusual. Literally, we got a call at about 2 o'clock and said, we need you here at 6. It's very important that you be here. And so people came in from all over the state and drove in and went to the governor's residence. And he called us in and said, we've been working on something for several months. And it was very hush hush. But that Ford Motor Company has decided to build the largest plant in North America in West Tennessee. It's going to be a $6 billion facility, a joint venture between Ford Motor Company and SK Innovations. We have in Tennessee what's commonly referred to as the mega site. Now, this really started before I was in the Senate, and it was in West Tennessee, about halfway between Memphis and Jackson around Haywood County. The state began accumulating land out in that area, just right around the interstate. And they just kept building and building and ended up with over 3,000 acres. And this was kind of a brainchild. Y'all may remember Ned Ray McWhirter, West Tennessee, Speaker of the House, Governor, John Wilder, longtime Lieutenant Governor from West Tennessee, and others. Jimmy Nafee was Speaker of the House from West Tennessee. And it was true then, it's true now. As great as things are going here in Williamson County and Middle Tennessee, that's not the case in every county in the state. And that particular area in West Tennessee has been economically disadvantaged for many years. We've tried to get manufacturing to relocate there, to get a company in there, something to stimulate the economy and get some jobs going. We can't answer the phone fast enough in Middle Tennessee from companies who want to move here. Knoxville's got a lot going on. Chattanooga's got a lot going on, but that I-40 corridor between Jackson and Memphis has been problematic for many years. So they began accumulating this land, and called it the mega site and said, we're going to market that to manufacturers and companies. Well, this has been going on for 20 years. And we have had some serious conversations, Rob knows, about are we ever going to be able to make this thing work? I mean, we've got all this land out there. There's no sewer. There's not enough electricity out there, for that. And all those things can be fixed, but it becomes this chicken and egg scenario about if you build it, they will come. Well, are we willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to get it shovel ready for a company to come when we don't even really have a tenant? Well, Ford reached out to us, again, very hush hush, and the negotiations began with the Lee administration and went on for several months. So that meeting at the executive residence was to tell us we have secured a deal. I'm going to have to call you guys into special session to approve what we put together. This is transformational and will be for not just West Tennessee, but the benefits of this are going to reverberate across the state. Literally a $6 billion facility, the largest capital investment Ford Motor Company has ever made. When it's all done, said and done, built out with all the suppliers and everything else, over 20,000 high-paying jobs in that section of West Tennessee. So it was a big, big deal. Now, we did appropriate, and I was very proud to do so, $500 million in reimbursable grants to Ford. And people talk about corporate welfare and, oh, you're giving money to these corporations. Well, no, here's what we did. We had the site, we already own it. If we're going to go through with it, we're going to have to build out some infrastructure and work with TVA to bring in electricity, get a sewer put in. It's just a lot to do, and it's going to cost some money. So the incentive we gave to Ford and SK Innovations is a $500 million reimbursable grant, meaning as they build this $6 billion facility out, we will reimburse them up to $500 million as they build it. And we have clawback provisions. If they walk away from the deal, if they don't end up employing the number of people that they said they would employ, we can get our $500 million back. So I used to be in the investment business, and $500 million for a $6 billion facility, that's a no-brainer right there. The return to Tennessee will be exponential over the next 20, 25 years. It's a really, really big deal. And again, I had folks, my constituents, some say, well, that's all great, but how's it going to help Williamson County? Well, first of all, we do a lot for companies coming to Williams County and greater Middle Tennessee. So there's been some of that going on. But again, just the revenue and the economic stimulation that will come as a result of this facility being built over there is really going to be a big, big deal for Tennessee. And I think it's emblematic of, again, where Tennessee is as a state. Companies want to come here. They're fleeing states like California, Illinois, New York. Don't mean to pick on those states, but in case you didn't hear, the Tennessee Realtors Association made Gavin Newsom the Realtor of the Year in Tennessee. Because these companies are fleeing those states. So I'm going to stop there and let's open it up for questions, and happy to answer anything that I've talked about or talk about anything I've talked about or anything else.
Jack, you mentioned the extra money from sales tax. Isn't that a lot of that on inflation? Because if we measured inflation like we did in the 70s, it's about 15%. So I would think sales tax would go up about 15%.
Absolutely. It is directly correlated. You're exactly right. Now, interestingly, the effects of inflation that we're feeling now were not baked in to the extent that they are now in this last fiscal year. And with the inflation, and with interest rates going up, if the Fed continues the path that they're on, you can expect the economy to slow, right? And again, I'm not an economist. I'm not saying we're in a recession, but a lot of economists say that we are, or that we will be. And if we are, let's hope it's shallow and we can come right back out of it. But there is a day of reckoning out there. There's no question. Another thing that contributed to that was all this federal money, all the stimulus that was basically Washington printing money as they do and injecting that into the economy. And so that's led to the inflation. A lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'd say things that are not sustainable. in the economy. All the more reason why we felt it was so important to make sure we build up that rainy day fund. We not take on any new debt. Let's keep us as well positioned as we can until we know what's going to happen with the overall economy. So,
Jack, you're doing a great job, bud.
thank you.
So you talked about the 6,000 that the state's adding to the schools. I know roughly 10,000 a year it costs to educate one kid in Williamson County. Does that mean it's now 16, or how does the math work there?
No, great question. And you're right. Funding, and I should have said this to give a little bit more clarity. The cost of educating a child is a partnership between the state and local government, right? So on average, it's not this in Williams County, but on average, it's about 2/3, say 65% of the money that's used to educate a child in public schools in Tennessee comes from the state, and 1/3 comes from local governments. But there is a wide deviation in that. You have counties, some of our poorer, more rural, economically distressed counties, it's 90% state money, 10% local. Williamson County in recent times has been 45% state money, 55% local. And that's because we get a raw deal, and we've been getting a raw deal with that old funding formula. This new formula is going to help with that. And I hate to throw around numbers, but it will be, I'll say this, it'll be in the tens of millions of dollars additional money out of that 1 billion recurring that we appropriated that will come to Williamson County. We put metrics in there, levers, as I said, it's the 6850, but we also put a provision in there for fast growing districts like Williamson County. One of the challenges our county commissioners have is they're having to build a dadgum new high school every year, or a couple of elementary schools, and they're very expensive to build, and they're not being compensated for that by the state. And why is that happening? Because it's a great school system. So the old formula was basically penalizing a county like Williamson County, and I could say the same about Anderson or Sevier, great school systems, people moving in like crazy. Why? Because they want their kids in those schools. So the state needed to, Governor Lee recognized this, I think the General Assembly did as well, that there needs to be some help to those local governments. So to your question, about 10,000 a year, that's a fair number on average, probably. Roughly 6,500, 6,800 of that now will come from local governments. But every district in the state will get an increase in funding. Yes, sir.
I'm sure each year there are a ton of really good bills that get passed. Unfortunately, that sometimes adds a lot of regulation and rules for companies that have to follow. Does anybody ever look at the bills that are out there and eliminate some?
Yeah. In fact, I sponsored legislation several years ago. We set up the Office of the Repealer. And for that very reason, when you look at the Tennessee Code Annotated, most of us have a bookshelf in our office, and it's got all these green books on it. And that is the TCA, that's Tennessee Code Annotated. And so a frequent question that gets asked in my office and other members' office, when someone's in presenting a bill saying, hey, would you support this bill? I'll say, I need you to convince me that it needs to go in the green books. Does it really need to go in the green books? And so that's a frequent question. I set up the Office of the Repealer, and it existed for about 2 or 3 years. And the job of that office was to go through that TCA top to bottom and take public input from a business owner, from a random citizen, from a corporation, didn't matter, about some stupid law that is in our code that is outdated, no longer needed, notify the Office of the Repealer, and then they would bring us legislation to get it out of the green books. And that existed for about 2 or 3 years. So before I became majority leader, I was chairman of the business committee. We call it the Commerce and Labor Committee, but it handles all business legislation. And I will tell you that if there was anything that was going to come out of my committee that was going to put any additional burden on a company, large, small, or otherwise, it was a very, very high bar to do that. And I would say that the bulk of the legislation we passed and continue to pass does the opposite. We're trying to streamline things, make government more efficient, and get those unnecessary burdens and regulations out of the books.
Jack, let me say thank you for what you do.
Sure.
And with all this growth that we've had and all the things that we've enjoyed here, we've also had some things happen that I don't know what's going on with it. I'd like to hear you address highways. and roads around here, because growth brings damage to the roads, and we certainly saw that this winter and the end of the summer.
Yeah, I talked about education being one of the most important things we do. The late John Wilder, who was a longtime lieutenant governor of the state of Tennessee, I got to overlap with him for 2 years before he retired, and then he passed away. He used to tell people the state of Tennessee is in 3 businesses: schools, roads, and healthcare. The healthcare component being our Medicaid program, right? Because we run that. We call it TennCare. It's a Medicaid waiver program, and it's a big part of state government. Education, of course, not just K-12, higher education, our community college system, our centers for applied technology. Education's a big deal. And then obviously roads. The gas tax that you all pay to fund the roads in the state of Tennessee was last set in the late 1980s. And the state portion of that, I think it was 21 cents a gallon. And it's cents per gallon. It's not a percentage. So it doesn't matter if gas is $2 or $5. It's 21 cents per gallon. And that was fine back then, and even through the 90s and into the early 2000s, it was doing pretty good. But I would ask you this: if you lived in Tennessee 20 years ago, and let's say you drive an average of 20,000 miles a year, and 20 years ago, you drove a car that gets 15 miles to the gallon, and today you're driving the same 20,000 miles a year and your car gets 30 miles to the gallon, you're paying half the tax to maintain the roads that you did 20 years ago. You follow me? Because it's how many gallons you're buying. And so we had to make a tough decision, and I supported it, and that was to increase the gas tax. Now, I can argue that it wasn't really an increase because it didn't bring it up to anywhere near, adjusted for inflation, the level that it was in the 1989, whenever it was last set. But we had to make that change because our revenues to build and maintain our roads were static at best and probably going down. The cost of building roads was going up year after year after year, and we had to make a decision. Now, there were some, we had a budget surplus at the time. And some said, well, just use your surplus dollars. You've got a surplus. Why are you raising my gas tax out here when you've got this big surplus? Well, here's why. 40% of that gas tax, by the way, it's also a diesel tax, is paid by people from outside the state of Tennessee. 60 cents of every dollar comes from Tennesseans. Now, our sales tax over here, where we had the surplus, 90 cents of every dollar comes from Tennesseans. You follow me? So what we did is we cut taxes over here that Tennesseans are paying, and we increased the gas tax here because all those trucks coming up and down I-40, that if you pass a truck stop in the state of Tennessee, it's pretty full, and they're in there putting $500, $600, $700, $800 worth of diesel in their truck. They're paying that tax to help us maintain the roads. Anyway, we passed the Improve Act. That put us in a situation we were way behind. We had a backlog of projects that, with the existing funding formula we had, was going to take 20 years to get cleared up. Things like the new Mac Hatcher extension and going out towards West Haven, Franklin Road here between Brentwood and Franklin, which is needed to be done. That's a whole other mess about why that's taking so long. Yeah. Oh, we've had some conversations about that. 96 East heading out to Triune and Arrington out in that way. So, but because of the Improve Act, we were able to get those accelerated. And so now this backlog of projects that was going to take probably 20 years or more to get done, we're going to get done in probably 5 to 7 years. So it's a problem. And even probably what we're doing now, we're probably not keeping up with what's going to need to be done from an infrastructure standpoint. So, yes.
Got 3 questions for you. Probably only have time to address one of them, but think about the others. In the education bill, what are you doing to improve and enhance STEM? What is the new?
I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you.
What are you doing to enhance STEM education?
Oh, yeah.
And second one is, how does the new formula increase accountability and performance for those underperforming districts? And the third one, what are you doing about school security?
Sure. Great questions all. And I could spend a lot of time on each of those. In terms of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, I talked a lot about K-12 education. So we've also done a lot with regards to higher education. I don't know if you heard us talk about the Tennessee Promise. We did this under the Haslam administration. And we're not using tax dollars for this. We're using lottery surpluses, which is what we are constitutionally required to do with those dollars. But we're in a situation with our lottery fund now to where we can provide any kid who graduates from high school in the state of Tennessee can attend a community college or a center for applied technology tuition free. Obviously, we have the Hope Scholarship Program, which is for four-year universities. We also passed Tennessee Reconnect, which applies to older adults who want to go back and finish their college degree, because we have to have these careers. We have to have these kids who have these skills in those particular areas. These companies that are wanting to come to Tennessee or expand in Tennessee, that's one of their biggest concerns. Where are we going to get a qualified workforce? So I think making that pathway easier to get these kids into a community college or a TCAT or a four-year university, whatever they want. Governor Haslam talked about the drive to 55. And I think the year is 2025 or something thereabouts, that 55% of all jobs in America will require some degree of post-secondary educational attainment. It's not necessarily a four-year degree. It could be an associate's degree or a certificated program from one of our TCATs. And Tennessee was at about 27% of our population. Maybe it was 30, but still way below where we need to be. We're making incremental improvements, Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Reconnect, to get kids in so that they could get those skills. The new funding formula, briefly, we now know where the money goes. And so we can literally pluck a child out of any school system in the state with this new formula and know exactly to the penny how many dollars are going to educate that child. We can't do that with the current formula. So the accountability comes from all levels of government. The General Assembly, if there's a district out there and they're not spending the money as they're supposed to according to the formula, then we can hold them accountable. And the comptroller will do that. Now parents can know, school board members can know, county commissioners who appropriate the money for the local contribution to school systems can know how that district is spending that money. So transparency, education, and people just knowing how much money they're getting and what it's supposed to be being spent on. Now, are you hiring a bunch of janitors out here? You know, is it a jobs program for family members of school board members? Well, that's not why we gave you the money. We gave you the money to educate the kid. And so now we can know if you're going to do that. Finally, school security. Obviously, that's top of mind for everyone with the tragedies that we've seen take place across the nation in schools. In Williamson County, we're fortunate. Every district has a school resource officer, an armed sheriff's deputy at every single school in Williamson County. Across the state, not all schools can afford that. We've appropriated $20 million to help fund those SROs in different counties that can't afford it, or they can use that money to harden their facilities, meaning just for security and locks and all the things to strengthen the security of those schools. Every year I've been up there, that conversation has taken place. And as the father of three kids, that my youngest just graduated from Williams County Public Schools, my wife and I were scared to death. I mean, when one of these things would happen. And so I think Williamson County does a good job. Our sheriff, Dusty Rhodes, many of you know Sheriff Rhodes, wonderful school resource program that we have across the district. So we're ready to partner with our local folks for either more school resource officers or money to harden facilities. All right, last one, I think? One last one. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Senator Johnson. My question is about, I'm a big sports fan, and I know there's discussion about the Titans and building them a new stadium. And specifically, I read something that says part of the money is going to come from tourist tax and that kind of revenue, but something in there mentioned 130-mile area for the local community to be taxed for that new enclosed stadium. Could you elaborate on that, please? Thank you.
Sure. And I know we're about to run out of time, so I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version and happy to stick around and talk in greater detail. The Titans came to us this past session and asked for $500 million through a bond issue to pay to put the roof on the stadium. I did not support that. I did not support that. I walked you through the Ford deal. You as my constituents, I can sleep at night saying the Ford deal was a good deal. That the ROI on that for your tax dollars is going to be through the roof. It is. I don't think the Titans made the case. I think it'd be great to have an enclosed stadium and have concerts year round and develop that property and everything else. They did not, in my estimation, make the case that the ROI would be there to service the debt and actually be accretive to our revenue in the state of Tennessee. Maybe they ultimately can. I took it out of the budget. It's one of the few times in the last 4 years that I've disagreed with Governor Lee because he supported doing it. And he's my friend and I have tremendous respect for him. We're on great terms. But I said, Governor, you haven't made the case. Go back to the drawing board, have them go back to the drawing board and come back. I took it out of the Senate version of the budget. The House put it in. Parliamentary machinations being what they are, it did ultimately pass. So the state of Tennessee has committed to the Titans that we will issue that bond, that we will do that bond issue. Remember, I said we've had no debt in 4 years. I'm proud of that. I like to come to you and brag about it. So we're going to borrow 500 million and pay for a roof on a stadium. I just had trouble with it. So, but it ended up getting done. And I will say this, the bonds won't even be issued until the stadium is done. And that's going to be 3 or 4 years probably down the road. But the city of Nashville, which is more specific to your question, they've got to pony up. And the Adams family has to step up to the plate as well, to use a baseball revenue metaphor for a football stadium. So the Adams family and the city of Nashville, it's estimated to be around 2 billion, 1.9 to 2 billion. The state's in for 500 million. The thinking is the Adams family will put in 700 million and then the city of Nashville will somehow do that. City of Nashville is broke. City of Nashville is broke. I talked about our debt. The city of Nashville has more debt than the entire state of Tennessee. So not picking on Nashville, but maybe I'm picking on them a little bit. So, how they're going to be able to get that done. We did authorize them to raise their hotel motel tax. We didn't raise it, but we gave them permission to do so if that's what the council wants to do. But they're going to have to be able to demonstrate to the comptroller that that will service that debt. And given their precarious financial situation in Nashville, I'm not sure that they can ultimately get there. So we will see. We will see what happens. We haven't spent a dime. We haven't issued a single bond. We just committed to them and made an agreement that we will do that upon completion of the stadium. We would issue those bonds. And all right, let me wrap it up. I do want to introduce Lee Hobbs. Lee is working on my reelection campaign here and doing a great job. So thank you, Lee, for being here. And I'm not here as a candidate, but I am up for reelection and I would get yelled at if I didn't say I would appreciate your vote. Thank you all for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Leader Johnson, thank you so much for your leadership for our state and also for your time today. We have a gift for you, which is a pen with our club's logo. And this is a book about Rotary that our club reads to first graders. And we would like for you to use your gift to sign this book. And we tell first graders about the guests that we had who signed the book when we speak to them.
Awesome. Great. I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you so much. If everybody would please remember to help put away the tables and chairs. And if there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, we are adjourned.